Hey guys, what's up? We have a great story based on a post from r/WritingPrompts. Today's prompt is: there are no known ways to kill a vampire. For years, hunters have handled this by tying heavy weights to vampires' ankles and tossing them overboard, deep into the nearest ocean, where they cannot escape. You are an oceanographer who doesn't believe in vampires. If Lawrence's dad could see him now, he'd shake his head and remind his son that if something was chained up there was often a reason for it. He had given similar advice when a 7-year-old Lawrence had rescued it turned out, very temperamental Pomeranian from where it was tied up outside the grocery store. In Lawrence's defense, until now he had not believed vampires existed. Then again, until that Pomeranian had taken a bite at his hand, he'd never met an unfriendly dog, either. The vampire coughed, spurts of seawater spilling onto the deck as its body shuddered. It pushed itself up onto its knees and the chains, still binding its ankles, rattled against the wood. Lawrence had dragged it on board a half-hour before and it had not moved much in that time. It had gaunt white skin and bedraggled strands of grey hair clung to cheeks sharp enough to puncture Lawrence's several attempts to start a conversation so far. He finally took the plunge. "Are you okay?" he asked, then cringed. Someone who had been trapped underwater for decades was probably not okay. The vampire glared at him with a look that suggested they agreed. Slowly the vampire eased itself into a crouch. It had similar proportions to a human, though the arms and legs were slightly longer, jutting out at angles, with shoulders that hunched near its ears. It shook itself and tiny droplets of water spattered across the deck. After several more moments passed with no further movement, Lawrence began to ease forward, clutching his notebook in his hand. He was aware, in some part of his mind, that he was being very stupid. What would his father say if Lawrence came home, crying because a vampire had bitten him? The Pomeranian had garnered little sympathy. "If you don't want to get bitten, don't touch things that bite." Lawrence stopped an arm's length away. The locals had warned him before he had taken the boat out, telling him to watch for the Garden of the Damned. He had assumed they meant some sort of unpleasant seaweed. In his many years of oceanography he had found that rumors of strange things in the depths was usually just seaweed. When his torch had flashed on something silver he'd assumed it was glinting off the scale of a fish. Instead, he had been horrified to find 24 bodies wrapped in heavy chains, clumped together on the ocean floor. Amongst them only one had been upright, chains having nearly rusted through. When Lawrence had broken the last link and swum the body back to the surface, the vampire had not resisted. He was desperately hoping that apathy would persist. The vampire watched him as Lawrence studied its face. There was no sign of the famed pointed teeth, but its mouth was pressed shut in a hard line and even Lawrence wasn't dumb enough to pry open. The ears appeared somewhat pointed, the nose a little flat. Interesting that even after years underwater, its skin had not wrinkled at all. Lawrence's skin got pruny every time he had a quick dip in the tub. The vampire lunged forward and Lawrence yelped, dropping his book and scrambling backwards on his hands and knees. Flashbacks of a furry, yapping face rose unbidden. But no attack came. When he opened his eyes he found the vampire peering down at his notebook where it had fallen open. It looked up at him and opened its mouth, revealing a pair of pointed teeth. "I am taller than this." Lawrence froze. "Beg pardon?" The vampire coughed again, heaving itself onto its feet. Its ankles were still clamped together so it wobbled as it stood upright. The shoulders that had hunched when seated dropped down unusually low, revealing an upsettingly long neck. 8 feet, is what I am, it breathed. "You have written 7. Right. Sorry. Of all the feelings Lawrence could have expected, the air of awkwardness that settled across them was not one of them. "Are you going to bite me?" Lawrence asked. The vampire cocked its head to the side. It lifted a long arm and gently tapped it against its temple, a small cascade of water pouring from its ear. "I do not believe so. Like any diet, the cravings are worst at the beginning. Eventually you do not miss the sweet treat." The vampire smiled and it might have been amusing, had the jagged canine teeth not turned it into a leer. It scooped up the notebook and began to flick idly through the pages. "Are you a scholar?" the vampire asked. Oceanographer Lawrence replied automatically. When that drew only a blank look, he nodded. "I scholar of he gestured vaguely out across the water. The vampire nodded. "Do you need an apprentice?" Lawrence blinked. "I have been starved of anything interesting for far too long. Your writing is messy but intriguing. And I know much of the ocean. You do? Lawrence asked. Yes. It is cold, dark and lonely. Not technically incorrect. The vampire seemed to interpret Lawrence's lack of response as a sign that further information was required. "I saw much of the sea creatures while I was imprisoned. Beautiful fish, lithe eels, curious little crabs. Once, I thought I saw a rare grave octopus. Lawrence's deeply ingrained sense of academic correctness bubbled up unbidden. "They are not native to this area. Was it just seaweed? The vampire deflated somewhat. Yes. After another awkward pause, Lawrence clambered to his feet and approached the vampire, suppressing his natural instinct to bolt away. "It can be boring, unrewarding work sometimes. You are welcome to join me, but you should know that it is, more often than not, just seaweed. The vampire looked up with ... Was that hope? Lawrence extended a hand. After a brief hesitation, the vampire took his hand and shook it. The hand, despite all logic and reason, was warm. "Then again, Lawrence said. Sometimes it's not. By user Hallis, That's it for today's stories. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. We are posting new content daily. See you next time.